So the idea that somehow Tesco is making £2 to £3 billion in profits is a bad thing completely overlooks the fact that they're making a tax contribution. They're also able to invest in their staff. They're also able to invest in their stores. Those profits have to go to keeping those stores up to date, modern, and compliant essentially with health and safety regulations. That's the whole point of profits. You invest in the business. Yes, you give money to shareholders. Absolutely, because they are also putting money into the business as well.
Exactly that.
And they expect a return from that. What is it about any of that these mind-numbingly illiterate morons do not get?
It's not hard. It is not rocket science. This is economics 101 that you would learn at school. Let alone
you would think so,
more.
but judging by some of the discourse on social media, you really do wonder.
Yeah, and the one that really bugs me, and we are going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole here, is as you rightly say, when people go, well, supermarkets are making record profits. Yes, they are. But they're also operating on the same profit margin. You look at Tesco, go and look at Tesco's annual report. They're operating on the same profit margin, around 4%, if not slightly tighter, that they've been operating on since 2020. There's no profiteering going on. There's no sort of massive conspiracy to, rig the price of bacon or milk or whatever it might be. These supermarkets, yes, they're making money, but that's because they're successful businesses. But they're not widening their margins outrageously. They are operating in a very, very competitive environment. And actually, if one of the supermarkets did try and go on a spate of profiteering, it would actually harm their business because the market is so competitive that they would just lose all of their clients. They would go and shop elsewhere.
Exactly. I mean, price and competition, they work hand in hand. Price controls do not work. Price caps do not work. We've seen that with the energy price cap, and that is likely to go up in July.
Yep.
That inflation print of 2.8% completely overlooks the fact that input prices rose at their fastest level in quite some time. I think it was since 2021, was it, or something like that?
I think you're right. Yeah, it was something like that, about just under 8%, wasn't it?
7.7%, the highest in over 3 years. Input prices surged by 7.7%, and output prices also jumped quite sharply as well. So that's inbound.
Yeah, and I think the key question for me is, and this can basically evolve in one of two ways. So, companies in whatever sector they're in are paying more for the goods that they get in to make the finished goods that they sell to us. They've got two options, ultimately. Either they then increase the price of the finished good that they sell to us in order to, cover that increased cost to the business, which results in higher consumer inflation, or they're forced to absorb that in their margin and don't raise prices at all or raise prices to a lesser degree. I think the issue that we're going to have here is that the companies don't have a lot of pricing power in the UK economy at the moment because our economic growth momentum is so weak, because the labour market has got so much slack in it. It's going to be, I think, very, very difficult for companies to pass on a significant proportion of these higher input costs, which is going to hit their bottom line at some stage.
Well, I mean, the alternative to that is essentially getting rid of staff. And there was a stat out earlier this week. I think it was from the Great British think tank that said that private sector hiring had slid.
I saw this, yeah.
Yeah, it had slid by about 330,000 over the course of the past 12 months, private sector. But public sector hiring had gone up by about 500,000 or 600,000. That is just not sustainable. By any stretch of the imagination, if you shrink the private sector, and that is certainly happening, and it is reflected in the recent unemployment numbers, at some point you're going to reach a tipping point where the private sector cannot support the public sector, and we are getting to that tipping point right now.
Yeah, I was going to say, arguably, we're already there, because you not only see it in terms of hiring, you see it in terms of wages as well, because earnings growth in the private sector is running about 2% below that in the public sector, 3 compared to 5, very roughly. And just taking it back to the borrowing numbers this morning, I think we're already at that point where the state, the private sector can't fund the state's obligations, because we had higher tax take in April, yet spending also increased, hence borrowing increased. This is becoming, well, I say becoming, we've been stuck in this doom loop for 2 or 3 years now, but it just seems to be getting ever deeper.